Last night, my wife Emma was on her way to meet her lover. She thought I was out of town on a business trip. But instead of heading to the airport, I booked myself a room, the exact same room she was planning to go to. Faking a business trip was easy, I even left the house with a packed bag and everything. But instead of catching a flight, I snuck back in through the back door, tailed her car, and made sure I arrived here first. I was sitting in the armchair in a dimly lit corner, waiting. When the door finally opened, I saw her with that smug little smile she always saves for her phone screen. She was texting someone, probably him, without even bothering to glance up. "Expecting someone, Emma?" I asked casually, watching as she froze in place, her fingers clutching the phone like it was the only thing keeping her standing. She looked up slowly, her face draining of color. For the first time in a long time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Emma's face contorted with shock as she processed the fact that I was sitting in front of her instead of whoever she was planning to meet. I leaned back in the armchair, watching her every move. It was almost like a game, one where I finally held all the cards. She blinked rapidly, still clutching the phone as if it might magically whisk her away from this mess. "What the hell are you doing here?" she snapped, but I could see her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit or some way out of this confrontation. It was pathetic. Normally, she's so confident, so sure of herself, but right now, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. "What am I doing here?" I echoed with a chuckle. "I should be asking you that. Or better yet, who are you doing here for?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. For a second, I thought she might actually confess. But I should have known better. Emma's always been a master of deception, the kind of woman who can lie through her teeth without so much as a twitch. And just like that, her expression hardened. The fear vanished, replaced by that familiar cold, calculating look. "This is ridiculous, Jason," she scoffed, rolling her eyes as if I were some jealous idiot who didn't have a clue what was really going on. "Are you spying on me now? What, you think I'm cheating or something?" I stood up slowly, feeling the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Every word she said made my blood boil. "You were coming here to meet someone. You thought I was out of town. So tell me, Emma, why don't we cut the bullshit and just be honest for once? Who is he?" She took a step back, her gaze narrowing. I could practically see her calculating her options, wondering if she could lie her way out of this one. "I'm here for a work meeting, Jason. I told you we have a new client I'm meeting with." "What, you thought I was sneaking around behind your back?" "Please." I let out a bitter laugh. "A work meeting? In a hotel room? At 9 p.m.? I pulled out my phone and waved it in front of her. "I've got a tracking app on your car, Emma. I saw you go to his place last week. I watched you pick him up. You really think you can still play the 'I'm just working' card?" For a split second, something like panic flashed in her eyes, but she quickly masked it. "You're insane," she spat out. "So now you're stalking me, tracking my car? What's next, Jason? You gonna hire a private investigator or maybe set up cameras in the house?" She was trying to turn it around, trying to make me the villain in this. I could see right through it. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "No, Emma, I didn't hire a PI. I don't need to. You're sloppy. Careless. And you know what? I used to think it was because you trusted me. But now I realize you just didn't think I was worth the effort to hide it from." The silence between us was deafening. She looked like she might actually slap me, but she held back. Instead, she took a deep breath and shook her head, trying to regain her composure. "Jason, I don't know what you think you saw, but you're wrong. There's no other man. I was just—" "Save it," I cut her off, my voice low and steady. "I saw the texts, Emma. I saw the photos. You sent him pictures of yourself from our bedroom, in our bed. So don't stand there and act like you're innocent. That shut her up. For the first time, she looked genuinely lost for words. But instead of breaking down or admitting the truth, she did the one thing I hadn't expected, she started laughing. It was a cold, humorless sound that sent chills down my spine. Wow, Jason, you really have lost it, haven't you? She sneered, crossing her arms over her chest. You went through my phone. You spied on me. You probably have some sad little collection of evidence tucked away somewhere, don't you? Well, newsflash, those texts. They were old. A stupid fling I had months ago, and I already ended it. So what? You're gonna ruin our marriage over that? I clenched my fists, trying to keep the rage in check. So you admit it. You did cheat on me. Did, Jason. Past tense. You act like I've been screwing half the city, but it was just one guy. And, honestly, I was going to tell you eventually. But now that you've gone full psycho on me, I'm not sure you deserve an explanation. Unbelievable. I stared at her, barely able to process what I was hearing. You think I don't deserve an explanation? You think you're the victim here? Emma shrugged, the same nonchalant expression she used when she'd forgotten to buy groceries or was late for dinner. Look, maybe I screwed up, okay? But you're blowing this way out of proportion. We can still fix things. It's not like I left you for him. I couldn't believe it. The audacity, the sheer arrogance in her voice. I took a step closer, forcing her to meet my gaze. You have no idea what you've done to me, do you? All those late nights, all those lies. I was starting to think I was losing my mind. And now you want to brush it off like it's no big deal? If you want to talk like adults, fine, she continued, her voice dripping with condescension. But I'm not standing here listening to you whine about your feelings. It's exhausting, Jason. You want to know why it happened? Maybe it's because you're never around. Maybe it's because you're boring, predictable, and I needed some excitement in my life. There, is that what you wanted to hear? I stood there, my mind reeling from her words. Boring? Predictable? I worked hard to provide for us, to build a life where we wouldn't have to worry about money or struggle like our parents did. I thought that's what she wanted too. All those nights I stayed late at the office, all the weekends I spent working, I thought I was doing it for us. But to hear her twist it around and use it as an excuse to justify her betrayal? That's your excuse? I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. You cheated on me because you were bored? Yeah, Jason, she snapped, throwing her hands up in exasperation. I was bored. You think coming home to a guy who's already half asleep on the couch every night is thrilling for me? You think having the same conversation about bills and groceries every day makes me feel alive? I opened my mouth to respond, but she cut me off, stepping closer, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and defiance. You stopped being fun, Jason. You stopped being someone a long time ago. So, yeah, I found someone who made me feel good again. Who made me feel wanted. You know what it's like to feel like you're invisible in your own home? Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt my resolve starting to crumble, but I wouldn't, let her see how deeply she was cutting me. So, this is my fault now? I asked quietly. All of it? You being unfaithful is somehow my doing? God, you're such a victim, she muttered, shaking her head. I'm not saying it's all your fault. But maybe if you had paid a little more attention to me, noticed that I was slipping away, you could have done something. Instead, you just let it happen. She was unbelievable. Every word that came out of her mouth made it clearer and clearer that I didn't really know who Emma was at all. The woman standing in front of me wasn't my wife, she was a stranger. I took a deep breath, trying to collect my thoughts. What exactly did you want me to do, Emma? I asked, my voice low and controlled. Did you want me to follow you around, beg for your attention? Should I have tried harder to impress you while you were busy with someone else? No, Jason, she said sharply, taking another step closer until we were almost nose to nose. I wanted you to see me. But you never did. Not really. You saw this version of me that fit into your perfect little world. You wanted a wife who was pretty, who kept the house in order, and who didn't ask too many questions when you stayed late at work. Well, newsflash, I'm not your perfect little trophy. It was surreal, standing there, listening to her rewrite our entire history. I'd never thought of her as a trophy. I loved her because she was strong, independent, because she challenged me. But now, she was acting like I'd trapped her in some suffocating cage, and she'd only broken free because she was desperate. You really think you're the victim here, don't you? I whispered, staring at her in disbelief. You cheated on me. You lied to me for God knows how long. And now you're saying it's because I didn't see you? Her jaw clenched, and she crossed her arms defensively. You wouldn't understand. You've never understood. Try me, I shot back, the anger bubbling up again. Make me understand, Emma. Tell me why sleeping with another man was the only way you could feel alive. Go on, I'm listening. She hesitated, her eyes flicking away from mine for the first time since we started talking. But instead of a confession or even an apology, she let out a harsh laugh. You know what? I don't owe you anything. Not an explanation, not an apology, nothing. You want to be mad? Fine. Be mad. Be furious. But it doesn't change anything. I did what I did. And I'd probably do it again. The words hung in the air like a dark cloud, suffocating and heavy. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She'd do it again? She wasn't sorry at all. She didn't regret it. If anything, she looked almost proud of herself, like she'd finally thrown off the chains of some invisible prison. Wow, I murmured, shaking my head slowly. I don't even know what to say to that. You don't have to say anything, she replied coldly. I'll leave if you want. But don't expect me to grovel at your feet, Jason. You were checked out of this marriage long before I was. Get out, I said quietly. Get your stuff and leave. She raised an eyebrow, almost as if she hadn't expected me to actually tell her to go. Really? Just like that? Yeah, I replied, my voice stronger this time. Just like that. Go be with your lover or whoever the hell you want. But we're done. For a moment, she stood there, her gaze boring into mine, as if she were trying to decide whether I was serious. Then she shrugged, turned on her heel, and started towards the door. You'll regret this, Jason, she said over her shoulder. You'll be alone. Miserable. Better alone than betrayed, I muttered under my breath, watching as she left the room without another word. I watched her walk out the door, my mind reeling. The silence in the room was almost deafening. I stood there for a few moments, half expecting her to come back, to say something, anything, that might make this mess make sense. But she didn't. Emma was gone, just like that, and the reality of what had just happened crashed down on me like a tidal wave. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I felt a strange sense of emptiness, like I'd just witnessed a part of my life being cut away. 8 years. 8 years of loving her, building a life together, and she just walked away without even a hint of regret. All the fights, the late nights where we'd laughed and shared our dreams for the future, had any of it been real? Had I been living in some sort of fantasy, blind to the truth that was right in front of me? I turned and kicked the armchair, hard. Pain shot up my leg, but I welcomed it, it was better than the numbness. How could she stand there and blame me for her choices? Blame me for making her feel invisible? It was sick. Twisted. And yet, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, maybe you should have seen it coming. But how could I? Emma had always been good at hiding things. I thought back to all the little moments that seemed off in the past few months, the late-night phone calls, the mysterious work emergencies, the sudden interest in hitting the gym and buying new clothes. I'd written it off as just her trying to better herself. After all, isn't that what a supportive husband should do, encourage his wife to be the best version of herself? How stupid I'd been. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like the walls were closing in on me. I grabbed my coat and stormed out, not caring where I was going as long as it was far away from that damn hotel. The elevator ride down felt like it took forever, each ding of the floors passing by hammering into my skull. When the doors finally opened, I stepped out into the lobby, still half expecting Emma to be there, waiting to ambush me with some last-minute lie. But she wasn't. The place was practically empty, just a few staff members and a couple of late-night guests milling around. I walked out into the crisp night air, breathing deeply, trying to clear my head. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. I knew who it was without even looking, Emma, trying to justify herself again, or maybe even her damn lover, gloating. I wasn't interested in hearing any of it. I needed to get away. I needed space to think. So I started walking, letting my feet carry me wherever they wanted to go. I ended up in a nearby park, one of those little neighborhood spots with a few benches and a playground. It was empty, of course. Who the hell would be out here at this hour? I sat down on a bench, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. How long had this been going on? Months? Years? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had no idea. Emma had been hiding parts of herself from me for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. It was easier to believe her lies, to tell myself that things were fine. Because if I'd known, if I'd truly seen her for what she was, what would I have done? A part of me wanted to call her parents, to tell them what their perfect little girl had done. But what was the point? They'd probably side with her anyway. Emma was always their golden child. No matter what she did, she could never do wrong in their eyes. And me? I was just the guy who'd never quite measured up, no matter how hard I tried. The phone buzzed again, pulling me out of my thoughts. This time, I glanced at it. A new text message from Emma, "We need to talk." I almost laughed out loud. We need to talk. After everything that had just happened, she still thought we could talk. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the message. Emma, Jason, I know you're mad, but this is getting out of hand. Let's just talk things through, okay? You're blowing it all out of proportion. I stared at the screen, disbelief mixing with a fresh wave of anger. Out of proportion? She was still trying to spin this, still trying to gaslight me into thinking I was the crazy one. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I debated what to say, if anything at all. Before I could respond, another text came through. Emma, look, I'm sorry for how it came out, but we don't have to end things like this. Let's just take a break, cool off, and figure out where to go from here. Please don't make any rash decisions. Rash decisions. As if I hadn't just caught her red-handed, planning to meet up with another man. As if I was the one overreacting. I took a deep breath and replied, my hands shaking slightly as I typed. Me, Emma, I don't need to cool off. I need you to leave me alone. You made your choice. Now live with it. I hit send and immediately blocked her number, cutting off any chance of further communication. Enough was enough. There was no point in trying to have a rational conversation with someone who clearly had no intention of being honest. For a while, I just sat there, staring up at the night sky. It felt like the world had shifted, like everything I'd known was gone. But at the same time, there was a strange sense of relief. I'd been living in a fog for so long, pretending everything was fine. Now, at least, I knew the truth. And it hurt like hell. But I'd take this pain over the lie any day. With a sigh, I stood up and headed back to the hotel to grab my things. This was just the beginning of what I knew would be a long, difficult road ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally see the path forward. Alone or not, I'd get through this. One step at a time. When I got back to the hotel room, the reality of what had happened hit me with full force. The place felt empty, haunted by the ghost of what I'd just gone through. Emma's perfume still lingered in the air, and I found myself staring at the spot where she'd stood, where she'd spat out those cruel words without a shred of remorse. Bored, predictable, you're not fun anymore. Her accusations kept replaying in my mind, each one digging in deeper, like a thorn I couldn't pull out. I'd never seen her that way before, so cold, so detached, as if the years we'd spent together meant absolutely nothing to her. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. I paced back and forth, trying to collect myself. My hands were trembling, my heart racing, and my chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I'd never been a particularly emotional guy, but this was too much. I wanted to scream, to break something, anything, to release this overwhelming surge of anger and pain building up inside me. Before I knew what I was doing, I grabbed a lamp off the nightstand and hurled it against the wall. The shattering sound was almost cathartic, and for a moment, the room was filled with silence again, save for the harsh sound of my own breathing. But it didn't help. The rage was still there, bubbling just below the surface, threatening to spill over. I kicked over a chair, then punched the wall, ignoring the sharp pain that shot up my knuckles. I just wanted it to stop, the thoughts, the images of her with someone else, the way she'd looked at me with disgust when I confronted her. Why hadn't she just confessed? Why didn't she look ashamed, or regretful, or even guilty? It was like she couldn't care less that she'd destroyed everything we'd built together. Stupid, fucking, bitch, I muttered under my breath, squeezing my eyes shut. How could you do this to me? But there were no answers. Just the quiet emptiness of the room and my own ragged breathing. I collapsed onto the bed, feeling completely drained. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind only exhaustion and a deep, hollow ache in my chest. I stared up at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything that had happened tonight. My life felt like a broken puzzle, and none of the pieces seemed to fit anymore. And then, without warning, the tears came. Hot, angry tears that burned my eyes and blurred my vision. I tried to hold them back, but it was useless. I buried my face in my hands, my shoulders shaking as the sobs racked through me. I'd never cried like this before. Not when my parents divorced. Not even when my best friend died in a car accident a few years back. But this was different. This was a kind of pain I hadn't known existed. I'd trusted her. I'd loved her. And she'd thrown it all away like it was nothing. All those nights I'd lain awake, worrying that maybe something was wrong, and she'd been lying right next to me, sneaking off to be with someone else. Someone who apparently made her feel alive, in a way I never could. How long had she felt this way? How long had she been pretending? My phone buzzed again, this time a call. For a second, I thought about answering, about screaming at her, letting her know exactly what she'd done to me. But I couldn't. I couldn't bear to hear her voice, her calm, dismissive tone, telling me I was overreacting, that it was just a mistake. I reached over, grabbed the phone, and threw it across the room. It bounced off the wall and hit the floor with a dull thud. I didn't care if it shattered into pieces. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Fuck you, Emma, I whispered hoarsely, my voice breaking. Fuck you for doing this to me. I lay there for what felt like hours, letting the pain wash over me in waves. Part of me wanted to call my brother, to hear a familiar voice, to just have someone tell me I wasn't crazy, that what I was feeling was normal. But another part of me, the stubborn, prideful part, wanted to keep it to myself. I didn't want anyone to know how completely she'd shattered me. How much of a fool I'd been. Because that's what I was, a fool. I'd trusted her blindly, never once suspecting that she was capable of something like this. All the little signs, all the warnings. I'd ignored them. Brushed them off. I'd made excuses for her because I couldn't believe that the woman I'd married, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, could be so heartless. I should have left the room. Should have grabbed my things and gotten out of that hotel, gone home, and started packing her stuff. But I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed, trapped in this space that was filled with nothing but painful memories. When I finally managed to get up, I made my way over to where my phone had landed. It was still intact, the screen lighting up with a string of missed calls and messages. Not from Emma this time, but from my brother, David. I stared at David's name flashing on the screen. My brother and I had always been close, and I knew he'd been worried about me lately. He'd even hinted a few weeks back that Emma seemed off during our last family gathering. I had brushed it off, said we were just stressed from work and life. I guess I should have listened. But now, I was standing on the other side of this nightmare, and I wasn't sure how to start explaining it to him. With a heavy sigh, I swiped to answer his latest call. Jason? You okay, man? David's voice was laced with concern, and I could hear the background noise of his TV muted quickly as he focused on our conversation. I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words. No, I'm not okay. There was a long pause, and I could almost see him frowning on the other end. What happened? Are you still at home? I'm at a hotel, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign on my tongue, like I was admitting something shameful. Emma, she's been cheating on me. David sucked in a sharp breath. Holy shit. Are you serious? Yeah, I croaked out, running a hand through my hair. I confronted her. She didn't even deny it, David. She just stood there and made excuses, like it was nothing. She even said she'd do it again. Jesus, Jason. He sounded stunned, and I could hear the anger building in his voice. What the hell? What is wrong with her? Where is she now? She left, I said flatly, staring at the empty space where she'd stood. I told her to go. I couldn't even look at her anymore. Good. You don't need to see her right now. She's toxic, man. You did the right thing kicking her out. You can't let her stay after that kind of betrayal. There was a part of me that wanted to argue, to say that maybe I should have stayed calm, talked it out, figured out what went wrong. But the logical part of my brain knew that wasn't possible. Not after everything she'd said, everything she'd done. What do I do now, David? My voice broke as I asked the question, the pain seeping through every word. What the hell am I supposed to do? First thing, you get out of that hotel room, David said firmly. Come stay with me for a few days. We'll figure it out together. You don't have to be alone right now. I hesitated, glancing around the trashed room. It was a mess, much like my life at the moment. I didn't want to leave things like this, but I didn't have the energy to clean up. Everything felt pointless. Still, staying here wasn't going to help anything. I needed to be around someone who cared about me, someone who could help me keep my head above water. Yeah, I finally agreed, nodding to myself. I'll head over there. Good. And, Jason? Don't you dare talk to her again tonight, okay? You need some space to clear your head. I won't, I promised, knowing deep down that I couldn't handle another conversation with Emma, not after how she'd torn me apart. I'm done. Okay, see you soon, David said gently. Drive safe, all right? I hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand. It was strange, letting someone else in on what had happened made it feel more real, more final. But it also made me realize that I wasn't alone. I had support, people who cared. And that was something Emma would never take away from me. I gathered my things, stuffing them haphazardly into my bag. I didn't bother with the lamp or the broken chair. I'd deal with that later, or just pay the hotel to clean up the mess. Right now, I just needed to get out of there. The drive to David's house was a blur. My thoughts kept circling back to everything Emma had said, every bitter accusation she'd thrown at me. But there was also a small, stubborn part of me that was beginning to realize something: this wasn't about me. It never had been. Emma's infidelity wasn't a reflection of some failure on my part, it was her choice, her betrayal. By the time I pulled up to David's driveway, I felt more numb than anything else. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was buried under a thick layer of exhaustion. I just wanted to lie down and sleep for 100 years, forget everything that had happened tonight. David was waiting for me at the door, his expression a mix of worry and rage. He pulled me into a hug as soon as I stepped inside, clapping me on the back. "I'm so sorry, man," he said quietly. "You didn't deserve this." The simple words nearly broke me again. I squeezed my eyes shut, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do, David." "You don't have to do anything right now," he assured me, guiding me into the living room. "Just sit, relax. We'll figure out the next steps together. But tonight, you just focus on keeping it together." I nodded, too drained to argue. He handed me a beer, and we sat there in silence for a while, the TV playing some mindless show in the background. I appreciated that he didn't push me to talk, didn't ask a million questions. He just let me be. Eventually, though, he couldn't hold back any longer. "So what's your plan? You're not seriously thinking about getting back with her, are you?" I glanced at him, surprised. "What? No. There's no going back after this. She destroyed everything." He nodded slowly, relief flickering in his eyes. "Good. Because you deserve better, Jason. You always have. Emma, she's not the woman you thought she was." I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, I'm starting to see that." David leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Promise me you won't let her weasel her way back in. Don't fall for her bullshit." "I promise," I murmured, staring down at the untouched beer in my hand. "It's over. For good." The next morning, I woke up at David's house with a splitting headache, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me like a ton of bricks. The events of last night felt like a bad dream, one I desperately wanted to forget but couldn't escape from. Emma's voice, her cruel words, kept playing on a loop in my head, each one piercing me like a knife. David had already gone to work by the time I stumbled into the kitchen. He'd left a note on the counter: "Hang in there, man. Call me if you need anything." Typical David, always looking out for me, even when I didn't know what to do with myself. I stared blankly at the note, then tossed it aside and grabbed a cup of coffee. I'd barely taken a sip when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, half expecting it to be David checking in on me. But it wasn't. It was Emma. A text message. "Emma, can we talk, Jason? Please. I'm at our house." I clenched my jaw, the anger from last night flaring up again. After everything she'd said, everything she'd done, she had the nerve to ask if we could talk. I almost deleted the message right then and there, but something stopped me. Curiosity, maybe. Or the need for some kind of closure, even if it hurt like hell. Against my better judgment, I texted back. "Me, what's there to talk about, Emma? You made your choice." Her response came almost immediately, as if she'd been sitting there, staring at her phone, waiting for me to reply. "Emma, I know, but I didn't mean what I said last night. I was angry. I just need to see you. Please, Jason. I'm begging you. I'm at home. My chest tightened. Home. The word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. That house had been our place, our sanctuary. Now, it was just another battlefield where she'd torn my life apart. But against my better judgment, I found myself grabbing my keys. Why are you doing this, Jason? I muttered to myself as I got into the car. Part of me knew it was a mistake to go there, to see her again. But I couldn't help it. I needed to hear what she had to say, even if it ended with me hating her even more. The drive back to the house felt surreal. Every street, every familiar landmark seemed to mock me, reminding me of how many times I'd driven this same route, eager to get home to her. Now, I was filled with dread, every mile taking me closer to whatever twisted game Emma was playing. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car parked outside. A part of me expected to see someone else's vehicle there too, his car. But it was just hers. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before getting out and walking up to the front door. It was unlocked. I stepped inside cautiously, my gaze sweeping the entryway. Everything looked exactly the same as it had before, but it felt different now, like I was walking through the remains of a life that no longer existed. Jason? Emma's voice came from the living room. I followed the sound, my heart pounding in my chest. When I turned the corner, I found her sitting on the couch, looking small and defeated. She wasn't wearing her usual makeup, and her hair was disheveled, like she hadn't slept. It was such a stark contrast to the polished, confident woman I'd confronted last night that I almost felt a twinge of sympathy. Almost. Why are you here, Emma? I asked flatly, refusing to let any softness creep into my voice. What do you want? She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. For a moment, she just stared, as if she couldn't find the words. Then, she took a deep breath and spoke. I want to apologize, she whispered. For everything. I shouldn't have said what I said last night. I shouldn't have hurt you like that. I folded my arms, leaning against the doorway. You shouldn't have cheated on me either. So why did you? Tears welled up in her eyes, and she buried her face in her hands. I don't know, Jason. I don't know what's wrong with me. I was stupid. I was lonely. You were always working, and I felt like I didn't matter anymore. So I made a horrible mistake. I felt a bitter laugh bubbling up inside me. A mistake? Emma, you didn't just make a mistake. You planned it. You lied to me for God knows how long. You let me think I was crazy when I started to suspect something. And then, last night, you stood there and blamed me for all of it. She looked up, desperation etched on her face. I know. I know, and I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to understand that it wasn't about you. It was never about you. Then what was it about? I demanded, my voice rising. Tell me, Emma. What was it about? Was it about excitement? Thrills? Did screwing some other guy make you feel alive again? She flinched at my harsh words, her tears spilling over. No, it wasn't like that. I wasn't looking for excitement. I was just lost. And he. Don't you dare talk about him, I snapped, stepping forward. I don't want to hear about what he did or didn't do for you. This isn't about him. This is about us. Or what's left of us. Emma sobbed quietly, covering her face with her hands. I love you, Jason. I really do. I messed up. I don't want to lose you. Please, don't throw everything away because of my mistake. Throw everything away? I repeated incredulously. Emma, you threw it away the moment you let him into our life. There's nothing left to throw away. For a long moment, we just stood there in silence, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Then she slowly stood up, crossing the room until she was right in front of me. Please, she whispered, reaching out to touch my arm. I know I don't deserve it, but just, give me one more chance. Let me prove to you that I can be better. That we can still fix this. I stared down at her hand on my arm, torn between anger and the lingering love I'd once felt for her. This woman had shattered my trust, destroyed my sense of security, but there was still a part of me that remembered all the good times, all the love we'd shared. But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. I can't, Emma, I said quietly, pulling away from her touch. You broke something that can't be fixed. There's no coming back from this. She looked at me, her face crumpling as the truth of my words sank in. So that's it, she whispered. You're just done. Yeah, I murmured, the finality of it hitting me like a punch to the gut. I'm done. And just like that, the last thread that had tied us together snapped. I turned my back on Emma, walking away from the living room without another word. But before I reached the door, I heard her voice, quiet but filled with a strange edge I hadn't heard before. Jason, wait, there's something else you should know. I froze, my hand on the doorknob. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to hear any more lies or excuses. But something in her tone sent a shiver down my spine. Slowly, I turned back to face her. What is it, Emma? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, her gaze flickering to the floor. She looked afraid. Actually afraid. And that's when I knew, deep down, that whatever she was about to say would change everything. More than the affair, more than the betrayal. This was something much bigger. I wasn't just with one guy, she finally said, each word seeming to cost her an immense effort. It wasn't just some random fling. A cold feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. What do you mean? Emma swallowed hard, wringing her hands together as if she could squeeze the truth out of herself. I got involved with someone else a while back. It started small, texts, then meeting up for drinks. It was supposed to be nothing, Jason. But it turned into something more. I shook my head, trying to keep up. You already told me you cheated. What else could there possibly be? Her eyes locked onto mine, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. It's not just one man, Jason. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes as if bracing herself for impact. I was seeing 3 different men at the same time. My jaw dropped. 3? I repeated in disbelief, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut all over again. You had 3 different guys on the side, Emma? What the fuck is wrong with you? I don't know, she cried, her voice breaking. I don't know what's wrong with me. I felt empty, and they filled that void. Each one was different. One made me feel alive, another made me feel powerful, and the last one. Stop! I shouted, cutting her off. I don't want to hear this bullshit. How long has this been going on? Over a year, she whispered, looking utterly broken. I know you hate me, Jason, but please, let me explain. It's not just about the cheating. Then what the hell is it about, Emma? I demanded, my voice shaking. You've already said everything you could to hurt me. What's left? She hesitated again, glancing nervously at the window as if she were afraid someone was watching. Her behavior was starting to freak me out, making me wonder if there was more to this than just some twisted love triangle, or quadrangle, or whatever the hell this was. Then, she dropped the bomb. It's not just cheating, she said softly. It's blackmail, Jason. The word hit me like a brick to the face. I stared at her, utterly confused. Blackmail? What are you talking about? One of the guys I was seeing, she continued, her voice trembling, he's not just some random guy. He's dangerous, Jason. He's involved in things. And he found out about the other two men. He's been threatening me, saying he'll tell you everything, ruin my life, and yours, if I don't give him what he wants. What the hell do you mean, dangerous? I demanded, my heart racing. What exactly have you gotten yourself into? Emma looked like she was about to collapse. I didn't know who he really was until it was too late. He started asking for money, lots of it. I've been draining our savings to pay him off. But it's not enough. He wants more, Jason. And if I don't give it to him, he said he'll come after you. I stood there, my mind spinning. This was insane. It felt like some bad thriller movie, not real life. Who is he, Emma? I demanded. Who the hell have you been messing around with? She looked away, her lips trembling. His name is Marcus King. He's a... Marcus King? I cut her off, feeling my blood turn to ice. I knew that name. Hell, everyone in our town knew it. Marcus King was a notorious criminal, rumored to be involved in drug trafficking, extortion, and God knows what else. People whispered about him like he was some kind of boogeyman, but no one ever had proof to put him away. Please, Jason, she whispered, stepping closer to me. I didn't know who he really was until I was in too deep. I tried to end it, but he wouldn't let me. And now I'm scared. He knows where we live. He knows everything. I took a step back, my mind racing. You brought a fucking criminal into our lives, Emma? I couldn't keep the rage out of my voice. You let him into our home? Tears streamed down her face as she nodded frantically. I'm sorry, Jason. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I kept paying him, he'd leave us alone. But it's spiraling out of control. Suddenly, the front door burst open, slamming against the wall with a force that made us both jump. I whipped around, my heart pounding, to see a man standing in the doorway. It was Marcus King himself. He was tall, imposing, with a cold, calculating look in his eyes. His presence seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Emma let out a strangled cry, stumbling backward. Jason, right? Marcus said, his voice smooth and eerily calm. He took a step inside, closing the door behind him. Nice to finally meet you. Your wife's told me so much about you. What the hell are you doing here? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Fear gripped me like a vice, but I refused to show it. Get out of my house. Marcus chuckled, shaking his head. See, that's not how this works. Emma and I have some unfinished business. And now that you're here, well, let's just say I've got a few things to discuss with both of you. Emma's face was pale as a sheet. She looked like she might faint. Marcus, please, don't do this. Leave him out of it. This is between us. Too late for that, Marcus said softly, his gaze shifting to me. Jason, my man, you've got two options. Either you help Emma pay off her debt, or things are gonna get real ugly. And not just for her. He reached into his jacket, and my heart stopped as I saw the glint of metal, a gun. Emma let out a gasp, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I was frozen, staring at the weapon in his hand. Marcus smiled, a predator's smile. So what's it gonna be, Jason? You willing to bleed for a woman who's been lying to you this whole time? In that moment, everything clicked into place. The affair, the lies, the money disappearing from our accounts. Emma had dragged me into a nightmare that had no easy way out. And I realized, with terrifying clarity, that this was never about love, or boredom, or feeling invisible. It was about survival. And right now, the only way to survive was to play Marcus King's game, and hope like hell I didn't get us both killed in the process.